I stood in Leo's doorway holding a pawn shop receipt. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. Gold necklace with pendant. Vintage. $45. My grandmother's necklace. 4 generations of survival, sold for $45. Leo was at soccer practice. Mark was at work. I was alone in the house with proof that my stepson had stolen the most precious thing I owned and sold it like it meant nothing. I wanted to burn his room down. I wanted to pack my things and disappear. I wanted to call Mark and scream until my voice shattered. I wanted to wait for Leo to come home and destroy him so completely he'd never recover from it. My hand swept across his desk. Everything crashed to the floor. The lamp, papers, books, trophies. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the destruction I'd caused. Then I stopped, because I realized something. If I exploded now, if I raged, if I left, they would call me unstable. They would say I overreacted. They would make me the villain in a story where I was already bleeding. But if I stayed calm, if I planned carefully, if I made Leo live with what he'd done every single day for the rest of his life, that would destroy him more than any scream ever could. So, I picked everything up. I put it back exactly as it was. I returned the receipt to the drawer and closed it. And then I started planning his reckoning. 6 years earlier, I married Mark at a small ceremony by a lake. He was kind, steady, recently divorced, and he had a 12-year-old son named Leo. I met Leo on our 4th date. He was small for his age, with dark eyes that watched everything and trusted nothing. He barely spoke during dinner. When I asked about school, he shrugged. When I tried to joke, he stared at me like I was a stranger. Afterward, Mark apologized. He told me the divorce had broken something in his son, that Leo blamed himself for his mother leaving. I saw the fear in Mark's eyes, the terror of losing his son, and that was when I decided I would try. Really try. We married 2 years later. Leo was 14. He stood beside his father during the vows, his face expressionless. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, I saw Leo's jaw tighten, but he said nothing. We moved into a new house together, a fresh start for all 3 of us. I gave Leo the bigger bedroom and let him choose the paint color, a dark blue that felt almost black. I helped him arrange the furniture and hang his posters without commenting on the angry music lyrics. When we finished, he muttered a quiet thanks. It was the first time he had thanked me for anything, and I told myself it was progress. That first year was brutal. Leo ignored curfews, skipped homework, and slammed doors hard enough to shake the walls. He made it clear I wasn't his mother and never would be. Mark was exhausted, trying to work full-time while parenting a grieving, angry teenager who seemed to push back harder the more he tried. So I stepped in not as a replacement parent, but as a steady presence. I made lunches even when Leo didn't say thank you. I drove him to practice when he slammed the car door behind him. I helped with homework even when he acted like I was stupid, and I stayed up late when projects were due, even if he pretended not to need my help until the last minute. I asked about his day. I listened when he complained about teachers. I showed up to games, even when he avoided looking at me in the stands. Slowly, carefully, painfully, I built something between us. By 15, he stopped slamming doors quite as often. By 16, he started saying good morning without being prompted. He began joining family dinners instead of eating alone in his room, and he started asking my opinion on essays and projects. "Do you think this is good enough?" he'd ask, turning his laptop toward me. "Which shirt should I wear? Can you help me with this?" I told myself we'd turned a corner, that I'd earned his trust. By 17, he texted me when he'd be late and called me by my name instead of avoiding addressing me at all. He asked for help before problems became crises. Mark would watch us together and smile, telling me how good I was with Leo and how he didn't know what they'd do without me. I believed him. I believed I mattered. I believed I'd built something real. I was wrong. Because when it mattered most, Leo chose himself, like everyone always does, and the family I'd spent 6 years building shattered in my hands. 4 months ago, money started disappearing. I withdrew $60 from the ATM on a Monday, 3 20s. I remember counting them twice before putting them in my wallet, already planning what I'd buy at the farmer's market that weekend. By Tuesday morning, only 2 20s were left. I counted again, checked my pockets, my purse, the car, the floor around the counter. The bill was gone. "Mark, someone's taking money from my wallet," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He barely looked up from his laptop. "You probably forgot what you spent." "I didn't spend it." "Then keep better track," he said, already dismissing the conversation. His tone stung more than the missing money. 2 weeks later, it happened again. $80 became 60, and this time I knew with certainty I hadn't touched the cash. "It happened again," I said. "Money is missing." Mark sighed, irritated. "Caroline, you need to pay attention to what you're spending." "I am paying attention. Someone is taking it." Silence filled the room, heavy and uncomfortable. "Who?" he finally asked, his voice sharp. "It's just the 3 of us." The implication hung in the air. I was accusing someone, either him or his son. "I'm not accusing anyone," I said carefully. "I'm saying money keeps disappearing. Or you're stressed and not tracking things properly." He was gaslighting me. Maybe not intentionally, but the result was the same. He made me doubt my own memory, my own instincts. Over the next 3 weeks, it happened twice more. $10, then 30. Each time I wanted to bring it up. Each time I remembered his tone and the way he made me feel irrational for noticing something was wrong. So I stopped mentioning it. I stopped trusting him to believe me. I moved my purse into our bedroom and kept it behind closed doors. The money stopped disappearing, and the relief I felt was immediately followed by a deep sense of violation. But something else shifted too. Mark and I stopped talking over dinner. We began sleeping on opposite sides of the bed, moving around each other like strangers. He came home and went straight to his office. I cooked in silence. Leo ate quickly and disappeared into his room. We were a family in name only. 3 people sharing a house but barely connecting. I felt profoundly alone in my own marriage, in my own home. And then my grandmother's necklace disappeared, and I knew I'd been right all along. The necklace had been passed down through 4 generations. My great-great-grandmother wore it through the Depression. My great-grandmother wore it when her husband died in the war. My grandmother wore it while raising 3 children alone, through cancer, poverty, and loss. She gave it to me the week before she died. Her hands shook, but her grip was fierce. "This belonged to my mother," she whispered, "and her mother before that. 4 generations of strong women who survived when everyone said they couldn't." She pressed it into my palm and told me that someday I would pass it to someone I loved, and I would tell them what it meant to endure. I wore it at her funeral. I haven't worn it much since, afraid of losing it or damaging it, too aware of what it represented. But every morning I opened the jewelry box, looked at it, touched the chain, and remembered her hands. It was my ritual, my connection to her and to the women who survived before me. One Thursday morning, I opened the box. It was empty. I blinked, looked again, and felt my heart stop. Just the velvet lining stared back at me. I checked the other compartments, dumped out my jewelry, searched under the dresser and behind it. I tore apart the bedroom, looked under the bed, in the closet, behind furniture, then checked the bathroom, the hallway, everywhere. Nothing. "Mark!" I called, my voice breaking. He appeared in the doorway, already annoyed. "What now?" That single word cut deeper than I expected. "My grandmother's necklace is gone," I said. His face softened slightly. He knew what it meant. I'd told him the story on one of our early dates and shown him the necklace on our wedding day. He asked when I'd last seen it, and I told him Sunday morning, absolutely certain. We searched together for an hour, moving furniture, checking vents and rugs. When we found nothing, Mark stood up and wiped the dust from his hands. "It'll turn up," he said. "You probably moved it." "I never move it. It stays in that box, always." "Well, then maybe it fell somewhere," he said. "Gold doesn't just roll away," I said. "The box was closed. It was there Saturday night and gone Sunday morning." He told me not to panic, but his voice had that careful edge again, the one that said I was overreacting. 3 days passed, and the necklace never appeared. I searched every room twice, moved furniture, checked places that made no sense. Mark stopped helping after the first day. "It's somewhere," he kept saying. "Things don't just disappear." But it had disappeared. From a closed box. In my bedroom, in my home. And I knew it wasn't lost. It was taken. The realization settled slowly, and then all at once. It wasn't lost. It hadn't fallen. It hadn't been misplaced in a moment of distraction. It had been taken. Stolen. And there was only one person in the house who could have done it. The same person who had been taking money from my wallet. The same person Mark refused to believe was capable of something like that. The same person I had spent 6 years trying to love, trying to protect, trying to understand. Leo. The thought made me feel sick. I tried to push it away, to tell myself I was being paranoid, that grief and stress were distorting my judgment, but every instinct I had ignored for months came rushing back. Still, I had no proof. Accusing him without certainty would destroy what little remained of our family, and Mark had already made it clear he didn't trust my instincts anymore. Searching Leo's room would mean crossing a line I'd never crossed before. It would mean violating his privacy, and it would almost certainly mean another fight with my husband. So I waited. I watched more carefully. I noticed how Leo avoided my eyes when I asked simple questions. I noticed the new sneakers he couldn't explain, and the way he guarded his desk like it held secrets. I noticed how tense the house felt, like everyone was holding their breath. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself I was imagining patterns that weren't there. I focused on daily routines, on work, on dinners cooked in silence, but the certainty grew anyway, quiet and relentless. Wednesday afternoon arrived with the house empty. Mark was at work, Leo was at practice. I stood in the hallway outside Leo's door for a long time, my hand hovering inches from the handle. I had never searched his room before. I had always respected that boundary, even when things were hard. But my grandmother's necklace was gone, and my marriage was already cracking under the weight of disbelief and silence. I took a breath, told myself I was only looking for the truth, and opened the door. I went straight to his desk. And that was when I found it. The receipt was folded small and tucked beneath a stack of old papers. I recognized the logo immediately. I unfolded it once, then again, my eyes scanning the words as if they might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. Pete's Pawn and Loan. Gold necklace with pendant. Vintage. $45. I read it once, twice, 3 times, each time hoping I'd misunderstood, that I'd imagined it, that the words would somehow change. They didn't. He had gone into my bedroom. He had opened my jewelry box. He had taken the most precious thing I owned and sold it for $45. My hands swept across the desk before I could stop myself. The lamp shattered against the floor. Paper scattered, books slid off the edge. I stood there shaking, breathing hard, staring at the mess I'd made. Then I grabbed his soccer trophies, one by one, lifting them over the desk. One drop and they would shatter, just like the lamp. I stood there for 5 long minutes, holding them, imagining his face when he came home and saw the destruction. "Do it," I whispered to myself. "Break everything he cares about." My arms trembled, my chest burned, and then, slowly, I set the trophies down. Breaking his things would feel good for 5 minutes. Making him carry the weight of what he'd done would last a lifetime. I picked up the lamp, gathered the papers, put everything back exactly as it had been. I folded the receipt and returned it to the drawer, closing it carefully. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sank to the floor and pressed my mouth. I screamed, raw and silent, pouring out 6 years of patience, kindness, and effort. 6 years of trying to build a family with people who saw me as convenient. For a moment, I wanted to leave. I imagined packing my car and disappearing, letting Mark explain my absence, letting them figure out their own lives without me. "They don't deserve you," I whispered. "Just leave." I sat there for 20 minutes, thinking ugly thoughts, planning cruel things, imagining their faces when they came home to an empty house. Then I stood up, wiped my face, steadied my breathing, and made a choice. Not the easy one. The devastating one. I got the necklace back the next morning. The pawn shop smelled like dust and old regret. Pete's Pawn and Loan. The man behind the counter didn't recognize me, but he recognized the item the second I described it. He pulled it from a tray beneath the glass, tagged at $120. "That one," I said. He studied it, then me. Kid who brought it in looked guilty. I counted out the bills without responding. When I fastened the necklace around my neck in the car, the familiar weight felt different, heavier, like it carried everything that had happened with it. I drove home and went straight to Leo's room. This time, I didn't search. I didn't touch anything except his desk. I placed a white envelope in the center where he couldn't miss it. I wrote the note carefully, every word chosen. "Leo, I know what you did. I found the receipt. I have the necklace pack. Come find me before your father gets home. We need to talk. Caroline." I left it exactly where the receipt had been, so he'd understand that I had seen everything. Then I went downstairs and started dinner like it was any other night. The normalcy felt surreal. I chopped vegetables, stirred a pot, set the table. My hands were steady now, even though my chest felt tight. Every sound in the house felt amplified as I waited. Leo came home at 4:30. I heard his backpack hit the floor, his footsteps on the stairs, the door to his room opening. Silence followed, long and heavy. Then his door opened again. Slower footsteps came down the hall. He stopped in the kitchen doorway, his face pale, the envelope shaking in his hand. "Sit down," I said quietly. He did. He started crying before I even spoke. "I'm sorry," Leo whispered. I'm so sorry. Tell me why, I said, keeping my voice steady. He took a shaky breath and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. There's this game online. Everyone at school plays it. You can spend real money to level up faster, get better equipment. I didn't interrupt. I just waited. It started small, he continued. $5 here and there from my allowance, then 10, then 20. It didn't feel real at first. I thought I had it under control. My stomach tightened as he spoke. I used Dad's credit card, he said quietly. Just small amounts at first. He didn't notice, so I kept going. How much? I asked. Almost $800. The number landed between us and sat there. When did your father find out? I asked. Last month. He was checking his statement. He was furious, made me delete the game, and said I had to pay him back. So you started stealing from me, I said. He nodded, tears running freely now. Just small amounts at first. I thought you wouldn't notice. I was going to pay you back, I swear. But it wasn't enough. Why wasn't it enough? He covered his face. The game company flagged Dad's card. They said there were unauthorized charges and that they'd report it if I didn't pay $1,200. Dad doesn't know. They keep emailing me directly. I stared at him. So you took my grandmother's necklace? He broke down completely. I didn't know what else to do. I was terrified. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I thought if I could just fix it before anyone found out, everything would go back to normal. His voice cracked. I told myself it was just jewelry, that you could replace it, that it was just stuff. He looked up at me, eyes red and hollow. But it wasn't just stuff, was it? No, I said quietly. It wasn't. I sat down across from him and looked at this 18-year-old boy who'd spent 6 years learning to trust me and who had just proven how fragile that trust still was. Your father will be home in 45 minutes, I said. You're going to tell him everything, every dollar you spent, every lie you told, every email from that company, all of it. His face went white. He'll hate me. He'll send me to Mom's. He'll be angry, I said. Very angry. But he won't hate you. He's your father. I leaned forward. You need to understand something. I could have called him the second I found that receipt. I could have destroyed you in front of him. I could have forced him to choose between his lying, stealing son and his wife. I paused, letting that sink in. I didn't, I continued, because I'm giving you one chance to do this right, to take responsibility instead of hiding. He was shaking. Why would you do that for me, after what I did? I touched the necklace at my throat. Because 6 years ago, I chose to be part of this family. I chose to love you even when you made it hard, even when you pushed me away. I took a breath. And I don't give up on people I love, even when they give me every reason to. Tears streamed down his face as he nodded. But this doesn't disappear, I said firmly. You're going to work off every single penny you owe, to your father, to me, to that company. I don't care if it takes years. You're getting a job, and every cent goes toward fixing what you broke. I stood up. And you're seeing a therapist, weekly. This isn't about a video game. This is about being so afraid to ask for help that you'd rather steal from the people who care about you. He nodded again, frantic. I'll do it. I'll do whatever you say. I don't want anything. This is what you're going to do to earn back a fraction of the trust you destroyed. I looked at him hard. Now go to your room. You have 45 minutes to figure out exactly what you're going to say to your father. He stood on shaky legs and walked toward the hallway. At the doorway, he stopped and turned back. Caroline, he said quietly, I really am sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I nodded once. I know you are. Now go. Mark came home at 6:30. One look at my face and he knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked. Sit down, I said. All three of us need to talk. Leo told him everything. Every dollar, every lie, every theft. He spoke through tears, his hands shaking as he tried to get the words out in the right order. I stayed silent and listened. Mark's face shifted as Leo spoke. Shock, anger, betrayal. When Leo finished, the house fell quiet. Then Mark looked at me and I saw something I hadn't expected. Not gratitude. Anger. You found the necklace days ago and didn't tell me, he said. I needed to understand why first. He stole from you, Mark snapped, and you kept this from me? My own anger rose. You didn't believe me when money was disappearing. You made me feel crazy. That's different. How? I interrupted. I told you something was wrong. You chose not to listen. You chose him over me. Mark's jaw tightened. He's my son. And I'm your wife. Or am I just the woman who makes dinner? The words hung between us. Leo sobbed, his head in his hands. This is my fault, he said through tears. Yes, I said, turning to him. You stole, you lied, you took the coward's way out. I turned back to Mark. But you taught him this. You avoid conflict, you dismiss problems, you protect him from consequences. Mark stood up. Don't make this about me. It is about you, I said. Leo learned to lie because the truth isn't safe here. I told you something was wrong for months and you didn't listen. I touched the necklace at my throat. That's why I didn't tell you, because I knew you'd make excuses for him. Mark's face reddened. That's not fair. It's completely fair, I said, and you know it. I turned back to Leo. You're getting a job. Every penny goes towards paying your debts. You're seeing a therapist weekly, and you're writing me a letter about what that necklace meant to me. I looked at Mark. Unless you disagree. He stared at me for a long moment, then finally said, No, that's fair. But his voice was cold, and I knew this had cost us, too.